Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're totally exhausted by the advice that starting a company is all about just going with your gut or, relying on sheer dumb luck, you're in the exact right place today. We're tossing out the guesswork. Instead, we're going to dive into a repeatable, heavily researched, scientific blueprint for building a business. We've pulled together hard data from top accelerators, elite sales experts, and literally neuroscientists to give you a step-by-step method that actually works.
So, let's start with a really alarming question. Why do so many founders just crash and burn, even after they've spent years building a product? Well, data from the Startup Genome Project reveals this fascinating and, honestly, fatal flaw. Founders tend to overvalue their initial intellectual property by a staggering 255%. Think about that. This massive cognitive bias leads them to lock themselves in a room and build these gigantic, incredibly complex products that absolutely nobody actually wants to buy. They just assume the demand is there instead of, actually proving it.
Now, to keep this from turning into a dry academic lecture, we're going to apply every single scientific concept we cover today to a real-world scenario. So, meet Cedric. He's an 18-year-old high school grad, and he's going to use this exact scientific framework to build a custom wand business totally from scratch. Whenever we hit a high-level theory today, we're going to zoom in and see exactly how Cedric executes it.
And here's your quick syllabus for this founder's journey. We're going to cover ideation, validation, branding, pricing, finding your first 10 customers, and finally, scaling.
All right, let's jump straight into Phase 1, the science of ideation. The very first mistake founders make is blindly running with literally the first thought that pops into their head. Instead, you've got to systematically generate at least 10 ideas before you start filtering them down. And that's where the hedgehog concept comes in as your scientific filter. Notice how it forces you to find the sweet spot between three specific things: what you actually enjoy, what you can genuinely excel at, and, this is the crucial one, what the market actually wants. It literally forces you to prioritize being of service to a market rather than just chasing a selfish hobby that has zero commercial viability.
This perfectly illustrates Cedric's initial pivot. See, at first, Cedric wanted to start a magical fitness studio. He was super passionate about it. But after looking at the market, he realized nobody was actually asking for that. It was a completely selfish idea. So he applied the hedgehog concept and pivoted to the wand studio. He loves wand lore, he can totally master the craftsmanship, and hey, there's a genuine existing market demand for custom fantasy props. He found his perfect intersection.
Which brings us to Phase 2, fast validation and MVPs.
This phase is all about proving people actually want to buy this thing before you drop a bunch of money trying to manufacture it. The entire goal here is lead generation, simply because everything else in business flows downstream from lead gen. Cedric doesn't need a factory yet, right? What he needs is a scorecard minimum viable product. By building a really simple, engaging online quiz, maybe something like, what type of wizard core suits your personality, Cedric can quickly generate leads and collect emails. Then, he can follow up with those specific people to conduct interviews and gauge real, actual interest.
Now, during those interviews, compliments are great, but they absolutely do not pay the bills. As the saying goes, interest is flattering, but payment is validation. Cedric hasn't truly validated his wand idea until a customer literally opens their wallet for a pre-order or a deposit. Only a real financial commitment counts as scientific validation, period.
Moving right along to Phase 3, brand identity and neuromarketing. So, once the market has validated your idea with their wallets, it's time to build the brand. But we're not just picking pretty colors here. We're establishing a brand identity that generates the kind of loyalty you just can't buy. And we do that using the science of neuromarketing. Top brands don't guess what looks good. They optimize their visual elements to trigger 4 very specific subconscious psychological responses. They use eye tracking to ensure the design grabs attention. They use EEG brain scans to measure cognition, making sure the core message is instantly understood. They use facial coding to guarantee the design evokes positive emotions. And finally, they use recall tests to make absolutely sure the brand lodges deep in the consumer's memory.
Practically speaking, this means Cedric isn't just randomly guessing what his wand packaging should look like based on his own favorite colors. He can leverage these principles by designing his packaging based on proven color psychology and emotional resonance. Basically, he is designing directly for the subconscious brain of his buyer.
All right, Phase 4, psychological pricing strategies.
So we have an emotionally resonant brand, right? Now we have to engineer the pricing to maximize both conversions and perceived value. Because pricing isn't just basic math, it is pure psychology. 30%. That number represents the massive revenue jump a cosmetics brand called BeautyLuxe saw. And get this, they didn't change their product at all. They didn't run some huge expensive ad campaign. All they did was deploy psychological pricing to their existing product line. Tiny tweaks in how numbers are visually presented create massive shifts in human buying behavior.
Cedric can use this exact strategy to map out his pricing. For his entry-level wands, he applies charm pricing, so pricing at $29.99 instead of $30, just to trigger that cognitive bias where the brain reads it as significantly cheaper. For his premium bespoke wands, he introduces decoy pricing. By adding an ultra-expensive gold-inlaid third option, he suddenly makes his standard premium wand look like an absolute bargain. He's heavily influencing the purchasing decision before the customer even hovers over the buy button.
Okay, phase 5, finding your first 10.
So you have the product, you have the brand, and you have the price. But according to Y Combinator's famous rule of thumb, you don't actually have a startup until you secure your first 10 paying customers. 10 is the magic number where patterns finally start to emerge. Now, finding those first 10 is dictated entirely by your business model. If you're building B2B software, your channel is probably LinkedIn, outbound, and running founder-led demos. But Cedric, he's running a B2C consumer brand. That means his go-to-market strategy requires him to embed himself deeply in existing niche communities, like specific fantasy subreddits or maybe some niche Discord servers, to sell his wands organically.
I want to highlight the absolute fastest way to fail at this stage, and that's burning your limited cash on Google Ads. Paid ads literally just amplify what already works. So if nothing works yet, you're just amplifying a whole lot of nothing. To get your first 10 customers, you have to do things that do not scale. It requires highly targeted, incredibly manual founder-led legwork. You actually have to go out and talk to people directly.
Finally, phase 6, scaling through sales incentives.
Let's fast forward a bit. Once Cedric hits 100 organic customers, proves his product market fit, and really understands his sales funnel, he can finally automate, scale up, and build a dedicated sales team to push his wands into retail spaces. But managing a modern sales team is not what it used to be. The current B2B selling environment is incredibly complex. We're talking longer buying processes, multiple decision makers, and tons of touch points. This complexity completely breaks traditional old-school commission models where one single rep gets 100% of the credit. To adapt to this, elite companies are transitioning away from those traditional structures and moving toward innovative building blocks. Instead of basic targets, they're using predictive algorithms and advanced analytics to completely rebuild their quota systems from the ground up. They're moving away from the lone wolf rep model, and instead, they're splitting incentives based on the actual effort of an entire team.
So, by implementing split incentives and pre-sale bonuses, which just means reps get staged payouts for hitting interim milestones on really long deals, Cedric can ensure his new sales reps actively collaborate with each other. Instead of fighting over territory or hoarding their leads, a frontline hunter and a technical product expert will work together seamlessly because they know the incentive structure is set up to fairly reward them both.
Man, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've methodically traced this whole entrepreneurial journey, right? From a simple spark of ideation, through the hedgehog concept, past the hurdles of fast MVP validation, deep into the psychology of branding and pricing, and finally through the manual grind of finding your first 10 customers to scaling a sophisticated, modern sales force.
The science, the hard data, and the exact blueprint are laid out right here in this explainer. You now have the exact same framework that the world's top accelerators use to build lasting, successful companies. But the execution part, well, that is entirely up to you. Now that you have the definitive, scientific blueprint for building a business from zero, what are you waiting to build? Get out there, validate fast, and let the market lead the way.